What would you do if you had one chance, one train, one interview, to escape poverty and build your dream? What if, in that exact moment, you saw a stranger fall badly? Would you stop to help, even if it meant losing everything? For Aaliyah Johnson, a black teen from Chicago, this wasn't a test. It was a life-altering choice. She missed her train to help an old man, and in that moment, her future shattered. But what she didn't know was that her act of kindness had set a time bomb, and the hard karma that was coming back would change her life and the lives of those who wronged her forever. The wind on the CTA platform at 63rd and Ashland was a special kind of cruel. It wasn't just cold, it was personal. It clawed its way through the thin fabric of Aaliyah Johnson's second-hand coat, a biting reminder of her reality. At 17, Aaliyah didn't just feel the Chicago wind. She felt the weight of her entire bloodline pressing down on her shoulders. Today, that weight was a physical ache in her chest. She checked her phone again. 8:17 a.m. The 8:22 a.m. Green Line train was not just a train, it was the train. It was the only combination of transfers that would get her to the University of Chicago's Hyde Park campus by 9:45 a.m., just in time for her 10 a.m. final interview for the Hyde Park Innovators Scholarship. This wasn't just a scholarship. It was an escape pod. Aaliyah lived in Englewood, a neighborhood that made headlines for reasons you never wanted to be a part of. She was a girl made of sharp angles and sharper intelligence. A mind that devoured textbooks on neuroscience, while her neighborhood was devoured by statistics. Her dream was specific. She was going to cure Alzheimer's. This wasn't a vague, noble goal. It was a desperate vendetta. She was going to do it for her grandma, whose memories were being stolen piece by piece in a nursing home just 10 blocks away, a place that smelled of bleach and quiet despair. The Hyde Park Innovators Scholarship was a full ride. Not just tuition, but room, board, books, and a research stipend. It was the kind of opportunity that didn't just open a door, it blasted a hole in the wall. Aaliyah had clawed her way to this point. She was valedictorian. She had a 4.0 GPA while working 20 hours a week at a corner store that had been robbed twice since she started. She had written an essay on the theoretical links between 2O proteins and neural inflammation that had, against all odds, captured the attention of the selection committee. This interview was the last hurdle. "You got this, Laya," her mother had said that morning, pressing a worn-out Ventra card with exactly $5 on it into her hand. Her mother's eyes were puffy from a double shift, but they held a universe of hope. "You go on and show 'em what a Johnson woman is made of." Now, that hope felt as brittle as the frozen litter skittering across the platform. Aaliyah clutched the strap of her backpack, the one good bag she owned. Inside was her meticulously prepared portfolio, her transcripts, her essay, and a letter of recommendation from her physics teacher, who called her a once-in-a-generation mind. She pulled her coat tighter. It was a beige wool coat, a size too large, that she'd found at a thrift store. It was meant for someone with a different life, someone who didn't understand that beige was a terrible color for a city commute. Underneath, she wore her interview suit, another thrift store find, a black blazer and skirt that she'd spent hours tailoring to fit her frame. She felt like a child playing dress-up, a fraud. "You are not a fraud," she told herself, a mantra she'd repeated 1,000 times. "You earned this." The platform was crowded. Men in construction gear, women in medical scrubs, all of them wearing the same mask of weary resilience. Aaliyah kept to herself, scanning the tracks. The digital sign flickered. 8:22 a.m., $2. A man nearby was coughing, a hacking, wet sound that made her inch away. Another was playing music too loudly from his phone, the tinny beat adding to the symphony of urban anxiety. Aaliyah's leg bounced, a nervous rhythm against the concrete. She'd rehearsed her answers. My primary interest is in the molecular mechanisms of neurodegeneration. I believe my resilience, fostered by my environment, makes me uniquely suited to the pressures of high-level research. Yes, sir. Mr. Henderson in physics was my favorite teacher. She closed her eyes, visualizing the campus. The Gothic architecture, the quiet libraries, the promise of a world where her brain was the only thing that mattered, not her zip code. A new sound cut through the noise. A low groan. Aaliyah ignored it. Everyone ignored everything. That was the first rule of survival on the CTA. You put your head down, you kept your hands on your belongings, and you didn't make eye contact. You became an island. But the groan came again, followed by a sharp, brittle crack, and then a sickening thud. Aaliyah's eyes snapped open. It happened in the fractured, slow-motion way disasters do. 10 feet away, an old man had fallen. He wasn't just on the ground. He was splayed on it, like a doll thrown from a pram. He was a white man, thin and frail, with a shock of silver hair. He looked to be in his late 80s. One moment he was standing, swaying slightly, and the next he had pitched forward, his temple smacking the concrete edge of a support beam with a sound that Aaliyah felt in her teeth. The crowd did what crowds do. It flinched, it gasped, and it parted. A small, empty circle formed around the man, a bubble of non-involvement. People looked, their faces a mixture of pity and annoyance, and then looked away, checking their phones, scanning the tracks. An 8:22 a.m. train was, for them, a more pressing matter than a broken man. Aaliyah froze, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. Don't look, don't stop. You have a train to catch. This was her programming. Helping was a luxury. Getting involved was a risk. What if he was drunk? What if he was dangerous? But then she saw the blood. It wasn't a lot, not at first, just a dark, glistening line starting to snake its way from beneath his silver hair, carving a path through the platform's grime. His glasses, thick and old-fashioned, were askew, one lens cracked. He was wearing an expensive-looking, if slightly rumpled, tweed coat, the kind she'd seen in magazines, not on the Green Line. He groaned again, a sound of pure animal pain, and tried to push himself up. His hand, thin and blue-veined, trembled violently. He couldn't get any leverage. He was too weak. 8:22 a.m., Wortman. The rumble started, the distant, familiar thunder of the train approaching. The guiding light appeared on the tracks, a cyclops eye in the gloom. The crowd shifted, inching toward the yellow warning strip, their collective attention now focused on the arriving salvation. It's not your problem, Laya. It's not. The man on the ground looked up. His eyes, a pale, watery blue, were wide with confusion and terror. They scanned the faces around him, indifferent, impatient, averted. Then they locked onto Aaliyah's. In that instant, he wasn't just an old man. He was her grandmother, lost in the fog of her own mind, looking for a hand to hold. He didn't say, "Help me." He whispered something else, a single word she could barely hear. "Eleonora?" The train shrieked as it pulled into the station, its brakes screaming against the metal. The wind from its arrival blasted Aaliyah, whipping her hair across her face. The doors hissed open with a pneumatic sigh. This is it. Your future. Get on. People began to board, a polite, shuffling stampede. Aaliyah took one step toward the open doors. Her entire body ached with the need to get on that train, to leave the man and her neighborhood and her old life behind. She looked back at him. His eyes were still on her, a silent, desperate plea. The blood was pooling now. Damn it. With a sob that was half frustration, half terror, Aaliyah turned away from the open doors. She wrenched her backpack off her shoulder, dropped it to the ground, and sprinted the 10 feet to the fallen man. "Hey! Can anyone help?" she yelled, her voice raw. No one stopped. She knelt beside him, the cold concrete seeping through her skirt. "Sir? Sir, can you hear me?" The doors of the train chimed, doors closing. Aaliyah's head snapped up. She saw her reflection in the window, a terrified girl in a mismatched suit, kneeling on a dirty platform. She watched, horrified, as the doors slid shut, sealing her fate. The train, her train, hissed, and then began to pull away, gathering speed, carrying her scholarship and her dreams with it. She watched it go until it was just a red light in the distance. The platform felt suddenly, agonizingly empty. Aaliyah turned back to the man. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely function. "Okay, you made this choice. Now live with it." "It's okay, sir. I'm here." She fumbled for her phone, her fingers numb. She dialed 911. "Yes, I have an emergency at the 63rd and Ashland Green Line station. An elderly man has fallen and hit his head. He's bleeding." She pulled off her blazer, her good interview blazer, and folded it carefully, pressing it against the wound on his temple to staunch the bleeding. The fabric, which she had so carefully ironed, instantly turned dark and wet. "Eleonora," the man whispered again, his hand finding hers. His grip was surprisingly strong. "It's cold." "I know," Aaliyah whispered, her own tears blurring the grime on the platform. "My name is Aaliyah. Help is coming. You're going to be okay." She had no idea if that was true, and she knew, with a certainty that settled in her stomach like cement, that she was not. The ride to the hospital felt like a betrayal. The ambulance, a vehicle of rescue, was for Aaliyah a hearse carrying her murdered dreams. She had ridden with the old man, refusing to let go of his hand, mostly because she had nowhere else to go. The paramedics had been efficient and grim, firing questions she couldn't answer. Does he have any conditions? Is he on medication? All she knew was his name, which she'd found on a medical alert bracelet. Marcus Gideon. They arrived at the University of Chicago Medical Center. An ironic twist, as it was just blocks from where her interview was supposed to be. As they wheeled Mr. Gideon through the automatic doors of the emergency room, a new kind of chaos enveloped them. Aaliyah was left standing in the waiting area, a ghost at a feast of tragedy. She was a 17-year-old girl, in a thin white blouse and a black skirt. Her wool coat left on the platform, and her blazer, now soaked in a stranger's blood, clutched in her hand. She looked down and saw a dark crimson smear on her skirt. She looked, she realized, like a victim herself. It was 9:52 a.m. Her interview had started and finished without her. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. Maybe I can still fix this. Maybe if I explain. She found a quiet corner by a vending machine and pulled out her phone. The battery was at 14%. She found the email from the scholarship committee. The contact person was a Ms. Eleanor Davenport, Senior Program Coordinator. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. "Hyde Park Innovators Program, this is Ms. Davenport." The voice was crisp, professional, and held the warmth of a stainless steel countertop. "Hello, Ms. Davenport. My name is Aaliyah Johnson. I'm supposed to be interviewing with you right now at 10 o'clock. There was a silence on the other end, filled with the rustle of papers. "Aaliyah Johnson. Yes, you are not here." "I know, I'm so sorry. There was an accident on the L train platform. An old man fell, he hit his head, he was bleeding, and I had to call 911. I'm at the hospital with him right now, at the U Chicago Hospital. You can check—" "An accident," Ms. Davenport repeated, her tone flat. It was clear she did not believe her, or worse, she didn't care. "Ms. Johnson," the woman said, her voice laced with a sudden, sharp impatience. We are interviewing 22 candidates over 2 days for 3 scholarship slots. Every single one of them is exceptional. Every single one of them is facing, I am sure, their own accidents and obstacles. Do you know what separates the ones who succeed from the ones who do not? Aaliyah's throat closed. No, ma'am. Punctuality and preparation. The University of Chicago is not a place that waits for you to handle things. It is a place that demands you be ahead of them. We value resilience, of course, but we value reliability more. If a simple train ride can derail your entire day, how can we possibly expect you to handle the rigors of a pre-med track and a graduate-level research load? But it wasn't a simple, I am afraid this interview is considered a no-show, Ms. Davenport said, the words like nails in a coffin. As per our written policy, we do not reschedule final round interviews. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. The click of the phone disconnecting was the loudest sound Aaliyah had ever heard. She stood there, phone in hand, until the screen went black. Best in your future endeavors. The empty, corporate pleasantry echoed in the sterile air of the ER. It was over. She had traded her future, her family's hope, and her grandmother's last chance for a stranger. A new voice, sharp and arrogant, cut through her stupor. Excuse me, you, the girl. Aaliyah looked up. A man in a tailored Armani suit was striding toward her. He was in his late 40s, with slicked back hair and a face that looked like it had never smiled, only sneered. He looked at Aaliyah's blood-stained clothes with open disgust. You're the one who came in with Marcus Gideon? Yes, Aaliyah said, her voice barely a whisper. I am. Is he okay? That's none of your concern, the man snapped. I am Arthur Gideon, his son. The doctors are with him. What I need to know is what you want. What I want? Aaliyah was confused. Yes. What is your angle? Arthur pulled out a thick alligator skin wallet. He's disoriented. He has a mild concussion. He'll be fine. I'm sure you told the paramedics you're his granddaughter or some such nonsense to get here. No, I just helped him. He fell. I called 911. Right, Arthur said, his lip curling. He pulled out 2 bills from his wallet. Look, I appreciate you handling the situation. It saved me the trouble of dealing with the riffraff on the platform. He held out the money to her. It was 2 $20 bills. This should cover your dry cleaning and your trouble. Now, you can go. Aaliyah looked at the $40. It was more money than she'd had in her pocket all month. It was car fare. It was food. It was an insult. She looked from the money to Arthur Gideon's smug face. This man, who wore a watch worth more than her family's apartment, thought he could buy her off, dismiss her like she was nothing. This man, who was the son of the man she had just saved. The numbness in Aaliyah's chest evaporated, replaced by a cold, quiet rage. She lifted her chin. She did not take the money. He called me Eleonora, she said, her voice clear and steady. Arthur's face changed. The sneer faltered, replaced by a flicker of something. Confusion? What? When he was on the ground, he looked at me, and he called me Eleonora. You should tell the doctors. He seems very confused about who she is. Aaliyah then did the only thing she had left to do. She turned around, clutching her bloody, ruined blazer, and walked out of the hospital. She left the $40 hanging in Arthur's hand. She had no money, no coat, and no future. But as she stepped out into the cold, she'd be damned if she let them take her dignity, too. The next 3 days were a blur of gray. Aaliyah didn't just feel defeated, she felt hollowed out. She went through the motions of her life in a numb silence. She went to school, but the lessons on the whiteboard seemed to be written in a language she no longer understood. She went to her job at the corner store, the chime of the door announcing customers, each one a fresh reminder that this store, this life, was no longer a temporary stop. It was the destination. She told her mother that the interview had been tough, and that they had a lot of good candidates. She couldn't bring herself to say the truth, that she had failed before she even walked in the door. She couldn't bear to see the hope in her mother's eyes extinguish. So she let it flicker, a cruel, false light she had to tend to while her own went out. She didn't hear from the scholarship. She didn't expect to. The silence from the University of Chicago was as absolute and cold as the February wind. She thought about Marcus Gideon. She wondered if he was okay. She wondered who Eleonora was. She wondered if he even remembered the girl who had sacrificed her future for him on a dirty L-train platform. She quickly decided he didn't. People like him, with sons like Arthur, lived in a different universe. They didn't remember the help. On the fourth day, Aaliyah was behind the counter at the store, stocking cigarettes, her mind a million miles away, when the door chimed. She didn't look up, just recited the script. "Welcome to Fresh Stop. Find everything you need?" "I am looking for Ms. Aaliyah Johnson." The voice was female, precise, and utterly out of place. It wasn't the voice of someone buying lottery tickets or a 40-ounce. Aaliyah stood up slowly. Standing in front of the chip rack was a woman in a severe charcoal gray suit. She had a leather briefcase in one hand and an aura of such intense, expensive authority that the entire store seemed to bend around her. She looked at the dusty shelves with a professional lack of expression. "I'm Aaliyah," Aaliyah said, her heart suddenly pounding. Was she in trouble? "My name is Sarah Chen. I am an associate with the legal firm of Gideon, Price & Stern," the woman said. She pulled a business card from a sleek case and placed it on the counter, next to a pile of spilled lottery ticket scraps. "I have been sent to find you by our senior partner, Mr. Marcus Gideon." Aaliyah stared at the card. Gideon. "Is he okay?" "He is in recovery, and he is insistent," Ms. Chen said, a flicker of dry humor in her eyes. "He has been asking for you since he became fully lucid yesterday. It seems his son, Arthur, was not entirely forthcoming with the details of your encounter." "My encounter?" "Mr. Gideon has requested your presence, this evening, at his home." Ms. Chen said it not like a request, but like a court order. "His home?" "Yes." Ms. Chen glanced at her watch. "A car will be waiting for you at your home address at 6 p.m. this evening. Mr. Gideon is aware of your mother's work schedule and has been assured you will be home from school." Aaliyah's head spun. "He knows where I live? He knows about my mom?" "Mr. Gideon is a very resourceful man, Ms. Johnson," Ms. Chen said. "His memory of the incident is, shall we say, sharper than his son anticipated." She picked a small piece of lint off her suit jacket. "He was particularly interested in the fact that his son offered you $40. Aaliyah flushed, the shame and anger of that moment returning. "I didn't." "He is aware. He is also aware," Ms. Chen continued, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, "that you missed a rather important interview that morning." Aaliyah's breath hitched. How could he know that?" "He read your scholarship application, Ms. Johnson, the night before the incident." This was too much. "What? Why? I don't understand." "The Hyde Park Innovators Scholarship," Ms. Chen said, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips, "is funded entirely by the Gideon Family Foundation. Mr. Gideon makes it a point to read the essays of every finalist. He was, I am told, particularly moved by your essay on Alzheimer's. He said it was the only one that wasn't just about ambition, but about love. Aaliyah gripped the counter to keep from falling. The man on the platform, the scholarship, it was all connected. But then why was he on the L train? A man like him? Ms. Chen's professional mask snapped back into place. That is a question for Mr. Gideon to answer. He does not, as a rule, enjoy his son's filtered version of the world. He prefers to see for himself, often to his own detriment. She turned to leave. 6 p.m., Miss Johnson. Please do not be late. Wait, Aaliyah called out, her voice desperate. What should I wear? It was a stupid question, a high school girl question, but it was the only one her brain could form. Ms. Chen paused at the door, her hand on the grimy handle. She looked back at Aaliyah, the brilliant, terrified girl standing in front of a wall of synthetic cheese puffs. Wear what you wore that day, she said, but bring the blazer, the one his son offered to pay to have cleaned. The door chimed, and she was gone. At 5:58 p.m., a black Mercedes Maybach pulled up to Aaliyah's apartment building. It glided to a stop with a silence that was more conspicuous than any noise would have been. The car was so clean, so impossibly black, it looked like a hole in the fabric of her neighborhood. Aaliyah watched from her bedroom window, her stomach churning. Her neighbors were already gathering on their stoops, pointing and whispering. This wasn't just a car, it was an alien spacecraft. She had done as Ms. Chen asked. She wore the same black skirt and white blouse. In a plastic grocery bag, she held the blood-stained blazer, still stiff and dark. She hadn't tried to wash it. She hadn't known how. A man in a black suit got out, walked to her building and buzzed her apartment. Aaliyah's mother, home early for this express purpose, her face a mask of anxiety and pride, kissed Aaliyah on the forehead. You go on, baby. You hold your head up high, you hear me? You ain't done nothing wrong. Aaliyah nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The ride was silent and surreal, and she sat on plush leather seats, surrounded by polished wood and soft, indirect lighting. The city slid by outside the tinted windows, the familiar, harsh sounds of her neighborhood fading, replaced by the hushed thrum of a high-performance engine. They drove north, away from Englewood, past the university, and into the heart of downtown, where the buildings pierced the clouds. The car pulled into a private, underground garage at the base of the John Hancock Tower, one of the most famous buildings in the world. The driver escorted her to a private elevator, which opened with a quiet ding directly into the apartment. The apartment was a penthouse that seemed to occupy the entire sky. The walls were glass, revealing a 360-degree, godlike view of Chicago. The city lights glittered below them like a carpet of fallen stars. The place was decorated with a severe, minimalist taste. Hardwood floors, abstract art, and furniture that looked more like sculpture than something you would actually sit on. And in the center of it all, sitting in a large leather armchair, was Marcus Gideon. He was not the man from the platform. That man had been frail, disoriented, and smeared with grime. This man was a hawk. He was clean-shaven, his silver hair neatly combed. He wore a plush navy blue dressing gown and looked every bit the reclusive billionaire. His eyes, though, were the same, pale, watery blue and sharp as broken glass. A purple, healing bruise marred his temple, the only sign of his incident. Standing behind him, stiff as a board, was his son, Arthur. His face was pale, and he looked furious. Ms. Chen stood discreetly by a fireplace that wasn't lit. Ms. Aaliyah Johnson, Marcus Gideon said. His voice was not loud, but it filled the massive room. Come in, please. Aaliyah walked forward, her shoes, the ones she'd polished with Vaseline, squeaking on the hardwood. She stopped in the middle of the room, feeling small. Thank you for coming, Marcus said. I apologize for the theatricality. When one is my age, one finds it difficult to get straight answers. He gestured to his son. My son, Arthur, for instance, he informed me that I had a dizzy spell, that a good Samaritan called 911, and that he had thanked this person on my behalf, and they had gone on their way. He's very efficient, my son. Arthur's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Imagine my surprise, Marcus continued, his eyes fixed on Aaliyah, when I began to remember things. A different story. A girl's voice. A girl who let her train go. A girl who used her own jacket. Your jacket, I presume? Aaliyah nodded, lifting the plastic bag. I brought it. Of course you did. A small, grim smile touched Marcus's lips. Arthur, take the blazer from Ms. Johnson. Arthur looked as if his father had asked him to handle a dead rat. He stalked forward, snatched the bag from Aaliyah's hand, and held it with 2 fingers. And now, Ms. Johnson, Marcus said, leaning forward, tell me what happened, from the moment you saw me, and do not leave out a single detail, especially the financial transactions. Aaliyah's eyes flicked to Arthur, who was vibrating with rage. Then she looked back at Marcus. She was terrified. But she was also a Johnson woman, and she was tired of being quiet. She took a deep breath. I was waiting for the 8:22 a.m. train, she began. She told him everything. The fall, the blood, the crowd that did nothing, the sound of her train leaving, her call to Ms. Davenport. The cold, final words. We do not reschedule. And then she got to the hospital. She told him about Arthur's arrival, his dismissal, his assumptions. He asked me what my angle was, Aaliyah said, her voice growing stronger. He thought I was lying to be there. And then he offered me money. How much? Marcus asked, his voice quiet. $40, Aaliyah said. He said it was for my dry cleaning and my trouble. Marcus Gideon closed his eyes. The room was so quiet, Aaliyah could hear the wind whistling against the glass, 50 stories up. When he opened his eyes, the hawk was gone. He just looked like a very old, very sad man. Arthur, Marcus whispered. Father, Arthur said, his voice tight. You have to understand. The girl was covered in blood. She looked like she was from where she's from. I was protecting you. I assumed she was an opportunist. It was a simple mistake. A mistake, Marcus repeated. You assumed. You assumed that a girl who would sacrifice, by your own admission, her own clothing to help a stranger, was an opportunist. You assumed that kindness, in her world, must come with a price tag. And so you offered one. $40. It was a chaotic situation, Arthur defended. But it wasn't, was it? Marcus said, his voice suddenly sharp. It was, in fact, very simple. You just failed to see it. You failed, Arthur, as you have been failing for 10 years. That is not fair. Fair? Marcus roared, and for a second, Aaliyah saw the power that had built this empire. You want to talk about fair? Marcus Gideon struggled to his feet, waving away Ms. Chen's attempt to help him. He was shaky, but his anger seemed to give him strength. He walked to the window, his back to the room, looking down at the city he owned. 10 years ago, Marcus began, his voice a low rumble. I gave you control of the Gideon Family Foundation. It was our philanthropic arm, our way of giving back to the city that gave us everything. Your mother loved that foundation. Aaliyah saw Arthur flinch at the mention of his mother. The Hyde Park Innovator Scholarship was her idea, Marcus continued, his voice thick with emotion. She believed in blasting a hole in the wall, as she put it, finding the brilliant ones, the ones overlooked, and giving them a chance. He turned around, his eyes burning. And you, Arthur, what have you done? I have run it, Arthur said, his voice defensive. I've managed the portfolio. I've increased our endowment by 22%. You have plundered it, Marcus hissed. You have treated it like your personal piggy bank. You've increased the endowment, yes, but you've decreased the giving by half. You've instituted cost-saving measures and rigorous new application processes. You've made it efficient. It's a business, Father. Charity is a business. Charity is a humanity, Marcus shot back. I've been looking into things, Arthur. While you thought I was just a doddering old fool, I've been reading. I've been visiting the places you were supposed to be helping. That's why you were on the L train, Aaliyah whispered, the pieces clicking into place. You were seeing for yourself. Marcus looked at her, his expression softening. Yes, Ms. Johnson. I was. I've been quietly investigating my own foundation. I had suspicions that the money wasn't going where it was supposed to, that the programs my wife cherished were being strangled. He pointed a long, trembling finger at his son. And you, Arthur, you are the one doing the strangling. These are baseless accusations, Arthur sputtered. Are they? Ms. Chen stepped forward, opening her leather briefcase. She pulled out a thin file folder. We have the wire transfers, Arthur, the ones from the Scholarship Fund to AG Consulting, a shell corporation registered in the Caymans. The consulting fees that just so happened to match the exact amount the scholarship budget was cut this year. Arthur's face went from pale to ashen. You've been spying on me. I've been auditing my own company, Marcus corrected him. Ms. Davenport, for instance. A good woman, I thought. But so cold. On the phone when I had Ms. Chen call to inquire about a hypothetical scheduling conflict. I don't know this, Ms. Davenport, Arthur lied, but his eyes darted around, looking for an exit. Don't you? Ms. Chen said coolly. She's your appointee. We have the emails, the memos you sent her. We must find reasons for disqualification. Maintain absolute rigidity. The goal is to reduce the accepted cohort to 0 over the next 3 years. Punctuality is a non-negotiable metric. Aaliyah felt the blood drain from her face. Punctuality. We value reliability more. It wasn't a university policy. It was a trap. You were trying to kill the scholarship, Aaliyah said, her voice hollow. You made it impossible to get, so you could tell your father it wasn't needed anymore. He wanted to trim the fat, Marcus said, his voice dripping with contempt. He wanted to prove that his efficient model was better, that my wife's passion was a waste of money. He was systematically defunding the very program this brilliant young woman was applying for, all while redirecting the money into his own pocket. Arthur's arrogance finally shattered, replaced by a sniveling panic. Father, please, it was a market correction. The world is changing. We can't just hand out money to everyone who has a sad story. A sad story, Marcus repeated, his voice dangerously soft. Ms. Johnson, tell me, what was your essay about? My grandmother, Aaliyah said, her head spinning. She has Alzheimer's. I want to study neuroscience, to find a way to help. Yes, Marcus said. He walked over to the unlit fireplace. Above it was a single large portrait, a woman with a kind, laughing face and bright, intelligent eyes. This, Marcus said, is Eleonora, my wife. She died 7 years ago, from early-onset Alzheimer's. Aaliyah's hand flew to her mouth. Eleonora. You, Marcus said, turning to Arthur. A son who had everything, have spent the last 5 years trying to erase her memory, her legacy. And this girl, he gestured to Aaliyah, this total stranger who has nothing, has dedicated her entire life to honoring it, to fighting the very disease that took your mother. He looked at Arthur with a cold, final clarity. You are not my son. You are just a market correction. The silence that followed Marcus's words was absolute. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a tomb. Arthur Gideon stood frozen, the color completely drained from his face, his Armani suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. Father, no. You don't mean that, he whispered. It was a plea. I mean every word, Marcus said. He walked back to his chair and sat down, looking suddenly exhausted but resolved. Ms. Chen, please make the calls. Right away, Mr. Gideon, she said, pulling out her phone. Calls? What calls? Arthur said, panic rising in his voice. Father, let's talk about this. We can fix this. I can put the money back. Fix this? Marcus laughed, a dry, bitter sound. You think this is about money? I could lose this entire building and not blink. This is about rot. You are a rot, Arthur. A rot I have allowed to grow in my own house for far too long. Miss Chen spoke quietly into her phone. Yes. Mr. Gideon is invoking the morality clause. Please proceed with the vote of no confidence. Yes. And please have the security team meet me in the penthouse lobby. Mr. Arthur Gideon's access codes are to be revoked immediately. Security? Arthur yelped, finally understanding. You're firing me? You're firing me from my own family's company? It is no longer your company, Marcus said. I am dissolving the foundation as it exists. We will start over, and you will have no part in it. You will have no part in any of it. You can't do this. I'll fight you. I'll take you to court. I'll tell them you're incompetent, that you're senile, that you fell on the L train. It was a pathetic, childish threat, and it was the final nail. Do, Marcus said, waving a dismissive hand. By all means, try, but you will be doing so without the Gideon name, without the Gideon lawyers, and without the Gideon fortune. I am disinheriting you, Arthur, completely and entirely. You will be left with the money you have stolen. I hope you saved it. You'll need it for your legal fees. My legal fees? As if on cue, the private elevator chimed. The doors opened, but it wasn't the driver. It was two large men in dark suits, the kind that were built to blend into walls, and a third man, Ms. Chen's superior. Ah, Mr. Davies, Marcus said. Thank you for coming up. Arthur Gideon, Mr. Davies said, his voice flat. The board has unanimously voted for your immediate dismissal, pending a criminal investigation into wire fraud and embezzlement. These gentlemen will escort you from the premises. The hard karma had arrived. It was swift, it was brutal, and it was unsparing. Arthur looked around, his eyes wild. He looked at his father, who refused to meet his gaze. He looked at Ms. Chen, who watched him with the dispassionate interest of an entomologist studying a bug. And then his eyes fell on Aliyah, his face contorted, twisting with a visceral, misplaced hatred. You! He shrieked, pointing a finger at her. This is your fault. You little gold-digging bitch! You did this! You planned this! He lunged at her. Aliyah didn't even have time to flinch. The two security guards moved with a speed that was terrifying. They intercepted Arthur mid-lunge, each one grabbing an arm, and subdued him in a single fluid motion. He was strong, but they were professionals. They lifted him off his feet and began to drag him towards the elevator. You'll regret this, he screamed, his polished shoes scuffing on the hardwood. She's an opportunist, Father. I told you. She's playing you. She'll take everything. She already has, Arthur, Marcus Gideon said, his voice quiet. She has my respect, something you never earned and can no longer steal. The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off Arthur's final incoherent curses. The silence that returned was different. It was clean. Aliyah was shaking, her knees buckling. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. Marcus Gideon looked at her, his face etched with a profound, bone-deep sorrow. Miss Johnson, Aliyah, I must apologize. For my son, for all of this. This is not the world you should have been exposed to. What about Miss Davenport? Aliyah asked, her voice small. The woman on the phone. She will be dealt with, Miss Chen said. But, if I may, Mr. Gideon. Go on, Marcus said. Ms. Davenport was terrified. Of Arthur. The emails we found show she pushed back, twice, on his policies. He threatened her job, her pension. She has 2 children in college. She was a victim of his, in her own way. We are all victims of Arthur, it seems, Marcus said sadly. She will be removed from the scholarship program, but she will not be fired. She will be given a lateral promotion, somewhere she can do no more harm. Or perhaps somewhere she can learn to do good again, free from Arthur's influence. He then turned his full attention to Aaliyah, who was still standing in the middle of the room, clutching the plastic bag with the bloody blazer. And now, Marcus Gideon said, we must address the real victim in this room. Aaliyah stood frozen. The adrenaline from Arthur's attack was still singing in her veins, and her mind was a kaleidoscope of broken images. The train platform, Ms. Davenport's cold voice, Arthur's screaming face, the portrait of Eleonora. She felt like she had been ripped from her life and dropped into a play she didn't audition for. Ms. Johnson, Aaliyah, please sit, Marcus said, gesturing to a sofa that probably cost more than her mother's car. Aaliyah sat, perching on the edge of the cushion. Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. The hawk was gone. The Titan was gone. All that was left was an old man, a grieving husband, and a deeply ashamed father. That day on the platform, he began, his voice soft, you had a choice between your entire future, a future you have fought and bled for, and a stranger, an old, broken man you owed nothing to. You chose the stranger. He shook his head, a look of wonder in his eyes. My own son, who I gave everything to, saw a stranger in his father. He saw a problem to be handled. He saw you, a girl who had just saved his father's life, and he saw riffraff, an angle, an opportunist. He looked at the floor. He offered you $40 for your trouble. I didn't take it, Aaliyah whispered, as if that were the most important detail. I know, Marcus said, a small, sad smile touching his lips. That, I think, is what enraged him the most, that your integrity wasn't for sale. He took a deep breath. The Hyde Park Innovators Scholarship is finished. My son has poisoned it. Its name is a mockery, but my wife's dream, Eleonora's dream, that is not finished. He looked up, his pale blue eyes locking with hers. I cannot give you back that morning, Aaliyah. I cannot unring that bell. I cannot erase the insult of Ms. Davenport or the humiliation of my son. But I can, perhaps, make it right. Sir, you don't have to. I know I don't. I want to. He stood and walked to a large, ornate desk. He picked up a single piece of heavy, cream-colored paper. Miss Chen, read it, please. Miss Chen stepped forward and took the paper. She cleared her throat. By decree of the newly formed Gideon Eleonora Foundation, we are honored to announce the creation of the Aaliyah Johnson Compassion Scholarship. Aaliyah's heart stopped. The what? Ms. Chen smiled. The Aaliyah Johnson Compassion Scholarship. A full-ride scholarship to the University of Chicago, awarded annually to one student who demonstrates not only academic excellence, but extraordinary human kindness and a commitment to community service. It is the single largest scholarship the university offers. Aaliyah couldn't breathe. But who? The first recipient, Ms. Chen continued, her eyes twinkling, is its namesake, Ms. Aaliyah Johnson, accepted with full funding to the undergraduate pre-medical neuroscience program. Oh my God, Aaliyah said, her hand flying to her mouth as the tears finally came. But that is not all, Marcus said, his voice gentle. He took the paper from Ms. Chen. This scholarship, he read, comes with a significant research stipend. But we felt that wasn't enough. The foundation is also making a $10 million endowment to the University of Chicago Medical Center to establish a new research lab, to be called the Eleanora Gideon Memorial Lab for Neurodegenerative Studies. He looked at Aaliyah. A lab, I am told, that will be in need of promising, brilliant young research assistants, and in 4 years, a new generation of graduate students, and in 8 years, perhaps, a new director. He was offering her not just a scholarship, he was offering her a life, a career, the exact career she had dreamed of. "Sir, Mr. Gideon, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said. "You already said it all on that platform." He had one last thing. "I am also aware of your family's living situation, and your grandmother." Aaliyah's tears stopped. My grandma? The foundation has acquired a new private care facility, a quiet, beautiful place, with the best neurological care. We would be honored if your grandmother would be our first resident, free of charge, of course. And my son's apartment, a rather nice 2-bedroom condo near the university, is suddenly vacant. I can't imagine a better tenant than you and your mother." Aaliyah finally broke. She didn't just cry, she sobbed. She cried for the train she missed, for the coat she ruined, for the days of hunger and fear, for the grandmother she loved, and for the man who saw her, who finally saw her. Marcus Gideon didn't move. He let her cry. When she was finished, she looked up, her face a mess, but her eyes bright. "I will not let you down, Mr. Gideon," she said. "I know," he replied. "You are constitutionally incapable of doing so." 5 years later, the L train doors hissed open at 63rd and Ashland. Aaliyah Johnson stepped onto the platform, her hand instinctively tightening on the strap of her leather satchel. It was a reflex. The platform was the same grime, the same wind, the same weary faces. But the girl was gone. In her place was a 22-year-old woman. She was a graduate of the University of Chicago, with honors. She wore a tailored wool coat that fit her perfectly. She wasn't here to catch a train to an interview. She was here to catch one home from the lab. Aaliyah was the senior research coordinator at the Eleanora Gideon Memorial Lab. Her undergraduate thesis on a new biomarker for tau protein tangles had just been published in a major journal. She was already a once-in-a-generation mind, just as her physics teacher had predicted. She made this trip once a month. Not to her old apartment. That building was a memory. Her mother lived in the condo near the campus, where she ran a community garden Marcus had funded. No, Aaliyah came to this platform to remember. To stand in the exact spot where her life had split into 2 distinct timelines, the before and the after. She had remained close with Marcus. He was the grandfather she'd never had. He attended her graduation, his eyes wet with tears. He called her Eleanora sometimes. Aaliyah no longer corrected him. She understood it was the highest compliment he could give. He was a constant, proud presence in her life. Her own grandmother had passed away 2 years ago, peacefully, in the beautiful care facility. Aaliyah had been holding her hand. Her passing wasn't a tragedy. It was a release. And it had solidified Aaliyah's resolve. Her mission was no longer a vendetta. It was a promise. The karma of that day had rippled out. Ms. Davenport, freed from Arthur's tyranny, had been transferred to Marcus's new foundation. Her job was to run the Aaliyah Johnson Compassion Scholarship. She was, by all accounts, a different woman. Kind, empathetic, and flexible. She had a new rule. "We are in the business of yes. Find me a way to say yes to this kid." And Arthur? His karma had been as hard and unyielding as the concrete platform. He served 3 years in a minimum security prison for fraud. He was released early for good behavior, a broken and bitter man. He lived in a small apartment in a suburb he used to mock. He'd lost his name, his money, and his father. He'd tried once to contact Aaliyah, sending a letter that was half apology, half demand for money. She'd given it to Ms. Chen, and had never heard from him again. A train rumbled into the station, the 8:22. Aaliyah smiled. She wasn't catching this one. She was waiting for the next. As the train pulled in, a young man, a teenager, was running to catch it, his backpack open, books spilling out. He tripped and went down hard, his papers scattering. The crowd did what crowds do. It flowed around him, impatient. Aaliyah's train was pulling in, her train home. She let it go. She walked over to the young man, who was frantically trying to gather his papers, his face red with humiliation. "Hey," Aaliyah said, kneeling, her expensive coat brushing the grime. "You okay?" The boy, who couldn't have been older than 17, looked up. He looked just like she had. Terrified, overwhelmed, and trying to hold it all together. I missed my train," he said, his voice cracking. "It's okay," Aaliyah said, helping him gather his calculus homework. "Another one will come. You just gotta be ready for it." She helped him to his feet, brushed him off, and zipped his backpack for him. "Where are you headed?" "An interview," he mumbled. "At the university, for a scholarship. I'm probably too late now." Aaliyah looked at him, really looked at him, and she laughed, a warm, genuine laugh that startled him. "What's it called?" she asked. "The Aaliyah Johnson Compassion Scholarship." Aaliyah's smile was blinding. She pulled a card from her satchel. "My name is Aaliyah Johnson," she said. "I'm on the selection committee, and I promise you, you're right on time." Aaliyah's story is a powerful reminder that we never know the true impact of our choices. A single moment of kindness, a choice to stop when the world is telling you to run, can set off a chain reaction that you can't even imagine. It's easy to think that one person can't make a difference, but as Aaliyah showed, sometimes that one person is the only thing that can. What did you think of the twist with Marcus and his son? What would you have done on that platform? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of kindness. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story of kindness, karma, and the incredible twists of fate.